we're going to start this session. It's called When the Byproduct Becomes the New Product. And there's going to be a lot of talk about just that this whole conference, I think. We're looking into making new products out of byproducts. I have today with me David and David. They didn't trust me with names. So this is David Magnussen from the Modern Byproducts Group. He is a Danish citizen, but he lives in Switzerland, and he's going to talk to you about his company in a little bit. And then there's David Courtemanche, who is the general manager of Marinov, which is a research institute, similar to the one that I work in, and he's going to talk to you about that too. I am, like these guys, passionate about byproducts and making new products from byproducts. I think it's incredibly important that we make products out of everything that comes out of the ocean, every biomass that we take out of the ocean, not only because we're going to need it in the future, but to me there's also an ethical perspective to it. If we use resources to take something out of the ocean, we need to use it, don't put it back into the ocean. Worldwide, about 2% of all meals come from the ocean, and in Norway, over 80% of all meals come from the ocean, so you're at the perfect setting to talk fish and marine resources. There's been a lot of talk. We were preparing for this session, and we were talking about what are the obstacles of a product becoming a byproduct, and we kept talking about them, and then David says to me, let's not talk about the obstacles, we're going to talk about the possibilities. What are the things that are going to drive us into total circular economy and total usage of all byproducts? And I really wanted to talk for a long time, but I'm so interested in what these guys are going to say, so I'm going to hand it over to you. David, do you want to start? David M. Do you want to start with telling us about your company? It's very interesting, and give me a couple of examples of successful products from byproducts that you have been involved in.
Yes, well, thank you. Well, we are a byproduct-focused company, so all our staff, when hired and when working, we always make sure that they are passionate and they really have both a private but also an entrepreneurial mission and kind of a fun-driven mission to, can I take a waste, which we of course never call it, but many call it waste, a byproduct, a low-utilized resource, and can we improve it? To a lot of people, that's simply fun. That's simply passionate. And if you at the same time can make money on it and be within the legislation, then you actually are doing something which ethically can be considered also very popular. So combining the passion and legislation and chemical skills, commercial skills, is what we try to do every day. And examples would be that, for instance, 12, 13 years ago, when in the early days of the omega-3 concentration industry and the capsules were coming on market, research is being done. We visited many of these startup pioneering industries, and their byproduct, the low omega-3, because they make omega-3 concentrate from a crude oil, and then they have a low omega-3 byproduct, which is never sort of marketed. And they were either burning it in their own boilers, or they were selling it as a heavy fuel substitute at heavy fuel oil prices, more or less. So let's say $200 per ton back then. So we said, well, that's can it really not be done better chemically, legislatively? Yes, legislation actually has some green incentive schemes. So there's some positive, helpful legislation. So we made some research on it and some trials and tests and chemical analysis, and by scaling up 8 Norwegian industries that had more or less the same byproducts from omega-3, we could consolidate their byproducts into a pool, get scale, and go out to other industries. So we went first biodiesel. So from heavy fuel to biodiesel, you actually triple the value. In real money for the Norwegian industry back then, it was roughly 20,000 tons, so that was $6 million added value, which triggered back to the industry, of course. We kept just a little piece. And then we went the next step after sort of that success story of 300% added value. we have then later made research and legislation in the European Union, Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, was that ethyl esters, and these are ethyl esters because they modify the molecules with ethanol in omega-3. We actually made research showing that ethyl esters into animal feed was not a negative oil, it was a very positive oil. So in 2014, the European Union changed their approved basic feedstuff list to include ethyl ester oils. So that was an achievement. It took us 5 years to document that to the European Union Commission, but that was achieved. And since then, for 2 years, we have been marketing these ethyl esters into animal feed. There is a certain resistance, a certain skepticism from the industry to use it, but step by step, by throwing through trial and success stories, one by one, the feed industry is getting on board and also welcoming ethyl esters. And then we doubled the price again. So now we're at 600% increased value. Another 6 million. Now the volume is bigger, so now it's maybe $12 million trickling back to the industry one way or another, and creating jobs and giving staff in the company a success feeling. So that's one story. I think our staff is very proud, and it's a 10-year mission. And the next step is, of course, getting it into out of feed, out of fuel, and then into cosmetics and into other applications. So the journey is never done. You're never done.
Right. David C.
On my side, David C. Yes. A great guy a few years ago told us that energy is everything and everything is energy. And when we are going into the sea and capture fish or raise fish, there's a lot of energy spent to capture, to get these molecules, these proteins out of the water. Now, nearly half of these molecules, nearly half of that matter is basically lost or unvalued. And that same guy told also the humanity that energy equals the mass times the speed of light square. There's a lot of mass there, a lot of mass which is not valued at its proper level. Now, all that mass is a loss of energy in the system, you know? And all that mass should be used for feed, for food, for pharma, for medical use, for agriculture, and also it brings back, it trickles down to economy, employment. When you have people working at adding value to something considered as waste, then you create economy, you create money, you create richness and energy, or at least you do not lose that energy. So what can we do about it? Because now every person here in the room has one goal. Well, one maybe would be making money. But yeah, with the other one, and I see it in each of you, is to change the world. How can we change the world? One project at a time, one use of it at a time. And this is the trick to do this, is to set up businesses, to set up research centers that work together, that collaborate, in order to innovate and to find innovative solutions to common problems that we had for the past centuries, in fact, using the matter in the sea. Yeah. So what we did a couple of years ago in Quebec, in Canada, we established Marinov, which is the largest Canadian innovation center in fisheries, aquaculture, and processing of marine products. Also working in biotechnologies with other partners. And this is where I come to, is that finding innovative solutions cannot be done alone, cannot be by one center, by one country, by one industry. It has to be across countries, across industries, across different aspects of the scientific work we're doing.
And to that, maybe ask across government and researchers and markets and industry and the importance of all those parts of the byproducts industry talking together. We talked about, a little before we started, about regulation. There's not an even worldwide regulation, or even European there is one, but the rest of the world, there's a lot of questions to how do you classify things as waste, as byproducts, as applicable for human consumption, or for feed for something that's going to be eaten, or for feed for something that's not going to be eaten. There's a lot of different classifications in Europe about it, and I don't think you have the same in Canada. And I think what do you think? I know there's not a big chance, but what are the steps that we can take in order to sort of unify the regulation across the industries and across the research science? Do you have a sort of view on that?
Once again, it's a matter of energy. Do we want to have individual businesses, individual sectors, individual governments trying to set up their baseline or their rules or the guidelines to classify the matter that we get out of the water? Shouldn't we just work together to establish common standards, common rules, common regulations? So to optimize the work that we can do in that matter. It has been done in processing. We have common or almost common standards that are recognized across the world. We have the ISO, different ISO systems that apply to different kind of industries. Yes, I think it's doable. I think we should take it from the start and not wait until there's many sets of regulations put in place, different sets of standards, and after that trying to arrange things. I think we should do it from the start.
Well, I think it's very, very complex, and I also think legislation is national. Most governments do not like to give away sovereignty, and therefore that it will be really unified is not going to happen, at least not in our lifetime. That you fight for it and you push for it, at least some improvements, yes, sure. I think individual companies and research institutions needs to obey by the local rules that exist and see that as an opportunity. In our company, I always tell my staff, don't talk about how bad the law is or how wrong the law is. The law is the law. Regulation is regulation. Then sometimes there are gray zones. It can be difficult to classify waste correctly because the law is actually not made for waste. So a lot of tariff codes are actually unclear, not because the people that made the tariff codes are bad people. They simply just didn't think of the byproducts that came later. So often in our company, we have products that we have brought to market that were never taken over a border before. And now we take them over the border for the first time from Colombia to England or from Canada to Chile. And the customs have never seen that product before. And they don't make a new tariff code just because you have a little new product. So there are obstacles, but we see them as opportunity. We see them as a driver of opportunity. That if something is for instance, a landfill legislation, it can be quite rigid in Europe, and some can see that as a problem, but actually we see that as a driver for development of products, that you force industries to create innovation because legislation drives it. One thing I would find really, really a huge driver for marine products as a whole worldwide is if more carbohydrates on land, so sugar, and if fats, the not so nutritional fats, were taxed or somehow limited in their use in human diets, because that would obviously diminish the consumption, or could at least incentivize less sugar consumption and maybe more protein and more marine products. So political decisions of that sort would give a fundamental change the balance of value and demand. So there are some ministers here, and I'm very pleased that I can tell those ministers that if certain carbohydrates that are not considered very nutritional would be taxed, then other much more nutritional products would have a better chance. And that would, for basically everyone here, be a huge boost to our industries.
Mm. So we talked about it a little bit earlier, but we can talk about it more. We talked about economies of scale to create a business model that works for byproducts. You had something to say about before we started. Can you repeat that?
Well, thank you. Yes. Well, we handle in our company roughly 250,000 tons, which on a global scale is Mickey Mouse. But the scale issue, to have an industry, to make investments in infrastructure, to employ people, have clever engineers and chemists and laboratories, you need scale. Everybody knows that. If you can produce your own product, well, then you scale accordingly because you produce more and more of what you need and demand and supply. That's exactly what is often missing in byproducts, and that's often the deterrent to industries to do something with their own byproducts, because they're not really deliberately producing the byproduct. So as a catalyst, we see ourselves as a catalyst that can tell competing or not collaborating industries that if we take your product and your product and your product and combine them, maybe transparently, open book, even though the competitor might benefit of it, well, now we get the scale. And then when you supply an industry with a byproduct-based, for instance, the feed industry, they don't want to, inherently, they don't want to buy a byproduct-based raw material, partly because of contamination risk, but also because they're afraid of the supply chain. What if our supply change technology? Well, then they don't get it. But if supply is based on 10 industries, supply into one sub-industry, then even if one factory shuts down or they change technology, well, you're still going to have supply. So to signal this as the middleman producer that somehow works on the byproducts, all that scaling and being conscious about the risks that the buyers see, even though they are officially interested in ethically participating in a circular consummation, often there are risks as well. So recognize them, work with them, and get scale.
On a different scale, natural resources are limited, and natural harvest is, it's a fact. So we'll have to move towards increasing the aquaculture production overall, not only because the resources are limited, but also because aquaculture allows us to control better the quality, the stage, the material, the raw material that we'll be using in further processes. So yeah, at this scale level, it's interesting. And also, when we talk about raw material access, and making the link with regulations of just earlier, regulations is very important. Rather we like it or not, it allows us to produce on a sustainable level the raw material that we need, and this is this could be seen as a limit, but it should be seen as an opportunity, because if we do produce raw material which on a non-sustainable level, then we're crashing the market. We're just crashing the opportunity here. We're missing the point. So, well, on a scale basis, I think we have to increase the investments and the work which is done in aquaculture to make sure we have access on the long run, on the long term, to the raw material that we need.
Yeah, we just an add-on to this. We also see as an industry, even though privately many can say, oh, that's really nice that you work with byproducts and that's saving the planet for resource waste. However, when we talk with banks, the moment they hear that we work with byproducts, the door is closed. Whether it's in Norway, in Switzerland, in England, in Canada, in US, anywhere, no funding. We are self-funded. We work with our own capital, have almost no loans, no credit line, because the banks don't want to get on board. They say they want to, and oh yeah, they want to be part of the circular, but so far I haven't met that banker yet.
I did this morning. Actually, yeah, talk to you right after. Yeah, sure. Okay. To develop products from byproducts, it's a time-consuming, expensive process. It's a long process too, and I don't think we can do it isolated. We have to do open innovation, to be very open about the results, very open about the things we do, the advancements and research we can share, and there's plenty of opportunities to do research on. So even though you share we share our results, there will be something else to search for right after, and in that case, that will allow the whole global community to raise, to augment, to enhance its knowledge of the natural environment and of course, the opportunities that there is to use that product further down the line. So collaboration, innovation, open innovation is the key here for us globally.
So I think one of the Davids here, you took us into what we're talking more into the market, or like the thought or the perception of consumers within the bankers, within the market. What do you like? Where do you see that going? Because everybody wants to get into byproduct, but there's no secret that there are really high thresholds to get into the market. I'm not going to talk about the challenges, so what are the opportunities to overcome those challenges or something? You know, how do we get the bankers to then invest? Does it have to be publicly funded in order to get over a demonstration phase, as we sort of often propose in NOFIMA, and like you need the publicly funding sort of risk taking some of the risk, and then the bankers taking the rest of the risk?
I'll take this one. Yes, because you talked about it this morning in another panel. What we're trying to do for the past 10, 20, 30 years now is to push innovation into the system, to push new products. And actually we need market pull. We need to know what the market wants. For this, we can do it again individually. We can have our businesses trying to seek what's their market need. Could we have a global intelligence on this? Could we have global market intelligence on what are the byproducts, what are the products, what are the chemicals required currently, and that will be required in the next 5-10 years? So we can start developing, like NOFIMA, Marinov, kind of start, and other centers, start working on developing products that would be used in 5-10 years down the road. So market pull would probably be the key, and when you have market pull, it would be easier to get money for financing your operations.
Absolutely.
Well, there's also the educational side to it. When I went to university back in the 80s, I don't think there was something called environmental engineer. You could study biochemistry if you were kind of a hippie or something, but it was not on the agenda really in universities, not very high. Now my nephews and the younger generations that I communicate with, and we employ young engineers, now they have much more byproduct approach educations. So universities are offering these in colleges and also in high schools. It's much more a theme. So I'm quite optimistic for those in the 20s or even younger, that they will be much more capable from an engineering point of view, from a chemistry point of view, to actually manage what we have maybe not managed yet. So I'm quite optimistic, because the educational level is really rising, and the whole thinking in a lot of younger people is much more passionate about what we're talking about here than it is in my generation.
Yes.
And not to talk about my parents' generation, they were even more just burn it, just dump it. So the mentality is changing, but also education is changing, and that's very optimistic.
For customers and for processing plants as well, processing owners, plant owners. If I may give an example, in the crab processing process, the processor may get $10 a kilogram for his crab, which is about 1 cent a gram, right? We developed a process a few years ago. It's patented. What we have coming from this process is worth 200.
So you're not sharing it openly?
No, not yet. Maybe in a few months. Well, basically, it's worth $2,500 a gram. So this is when we look, and that product before was just going down the drain. And nobody just knew it existed or was not using it. So if we go through all the fisheries, all the processing systems or processes that we have, then I think we can find opportunities in every of these steps of the processing plant.
Yeah, I have one last thing to add on how to bring a new product or a byproduct-based product to the market and overcome skepticism and obstacles. Certificates. I think certificates and certification by third-party bodies, by neutral professional councils. We see that as a really important pathway, especially for byproducts and new products, where there is a skepticism by the consumer. Is it waste-based? Then I'm not going to buy it. Or this is just new. Or how can I know it's safe? And is it really from byproduct? Or so a lot of questions can be raised. But there, to have serious certification and certification bodies which can give a certain comfort to the buyer and the middlemen, that what is the origin of this product, does it fulfill certain criteria nutritionally or health or sustainability or whatever it is. I think certification is something very valuable if you want to go byproduct and upscale. Then you need often some kind of third body endorsement
and is that
structure.
I think
For
you
the
could-
whole chain.
Yeah, for the
Because
whole
currently what
yeah.
we do fishing, and then we do certification for and the processing plant, and then we do certification for the pharma grade.
Yeah.
That has to take into account the whole chain of production.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. And it's coming. It's coming.
It's coming.
And
Yeah.
that's-
So we are a big supporter of that, and we participate in certain certificate schemes as much as possible with the products we work with. But we are a big supporter of that and hope for more of that.
It's interesting. Thank you, guys. I think we're about to start running out of time here. I'm timing us very tightly because I don't want to run over. But just to conclude, to summarize what we've been talking about, you said in order to get products out, obviously we need the research. We need to figure out what's in there. We need to find the valuable components and we need to get them out in some scale. We need regulation that's predictable and that we can follow at least. And certification throughout the entire value chain. We need investments to be made both by official governments, but also the banking industry or the other loaners need to come out to, on the field and actually get into this industry too. And we need to know what the market needs. We need to know where the market is going, and we need to predict or adapt or create new markets in order to get our products out and get a total utilization of all the marine biomass. And then last but not least, we are educating a new sort of generation of people that are much more aware of the values within marine byproducts than maybe us less young are, because I'm not going to call me old. So there we go. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, David. Thank you, David.
Thank you,
It's very nice to
Thank
talk to you, and I hope you all had an interesting session. Thank you.